Shortly before the fall of communism, Poland's roundtable talks about solidarity. The Communists and the Catholic Church paved the way for the fall of communism in Poland. Partially free elections win for solidarity, and the first Prime Minister Tadeusz Mazowiecki is a non-communist. On February 6, 1989, negotiations between the Polish government and the members of the underground labor union Solidarity opened officially in Warsaw. The fall of communism in Poland was in 1989. The economic crisis, growing since 1976, had led to a destabilization of the political system based on homogenic position of the Polish United Workers' Party in 1980. The creation of NSZZ Solidarity and its over year-long period of legal functioning significantly altered the social awareness, a change which could no longer be reversed by the so-called politics of normalization. The Velvet Revolution was a revolution in Czechoslovakia and was a non-violent transition to power, which occurred November 17th to December 29th, and communism fell during that time. The fall of communism was the fall of the Soviet Union as well. They disintegrated into 15 separate countries, and its collapse was a triumph of democracy over totalitarianism. Back then, the main countries that were communist were Poland, East Germany, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Bulgaria, Romania, Albania, and Yugoslavia. Communism caused environmental and social disaster. Widespread hunger and unemployment made life under communism unbearable, and thousands of people suffered. Media and technology kept people in communist countries hopeful and informed of all the benefits of a democracy. They promoted liberties outside of their countries, so the government was unable to keep them out of the dark. Before Russia was changed to communism, they practiced Tsardom, which was made by the current ruler of Russia, Tsar Nicholas II. Russia became communist because Tsar was not giving out enough food for the people and because he insisted on fighting in World War I. Lenin and the Bolsheviks steadily began to gain popularity. Lenin's political party was popular because they could get them out of the war and help with food storage. Lenin promised his starving people that he could provide them with food, water, and land that was occupied by the rich. Lenin promised total equality under communism and an end to World War I. Under the Tsars, many people were subject to serfdom or menial labor with little to no pay, comparable to slavery. The Russian people were tired of this life and followed Lenin and the Bolsheviks into communism. A longtime Communist Party politician, Mikhail Gorbachev, came into power in 1985. He introduced two sets of policies he hoped would reform the political system and help the USSR become a more prosperous, productive nation. They were called Glasnost and Perestroika, which caused the collapse of the Soviet Union. Gorbachev's Glasnost plan called for political openness. It addressed personal remaining traces of Stalinist repression, such as the banning of books and the much-loathed secret police. Newspapers could criticize the government, and parties other than the Communist Party could participate in elections. Perestroika was Gorbachev's plan for economic restructuring. Under Perestroika, the Soviet Union began to move toward a hybrid communist capitalist system, much like modern China. The policy-making committee of the Communist Party, called the Politburo, would still control the direction of the economy. Yet the government would allow market forces to dictate some production and development decisions. During the 1960s and 1970s, the Communist Party elite rapidly gained wealth and power while millions of average Soviet citizens faced starvation. The Soviet Union's push to industrialize at any cost resulted in frequent food shortages and consumer goods. Breadlines were common throughout the 1970s and 1980s. Soviet citizens often did not have access to basic needs such as clothing or shoes. The USSR faced foreign attacks of the Soviet economy. In the 1980s, the United States under President Ronald Reagan isolated the Soviet economy from the rest of the world and helped drive oil prices to their lowest levels in decades. When the Soviet Union's oil and gas revenue dropped dramatically, the USSR began to lose its hold on Eastern Europe. Gorbachev's reforms were slow to bear and did more to hasten the collapse of the Soviet Union than to help it. Political revolution in Poland in 1989 sparked other mostly peaceful revolutions across the Eastern Europe states and led to the toppling of the Berlin Wall. On December 25th, Gorbachev resigned as leader of the USSR. The Soviet Union ceased to exist on December 31st, 1991.
The separation of Berlin began in 1945 after the collapse of Germany. The country was divided into 4 zones, where each superpower controlled a zone. In 1946, reparation agreements broke down between the Soviet and Western zones. Response of the West was to merge French, British, and American zones in 1947. On August 13, 1961, the communist government of the German Democratic Republic began to build a barbed wire and concrete anti-fascist bulwark between East and West Germany. Nikita Khrushchev, the Soviet leader, suggested that East Germany close off access to the West Berlin to avoid problem from going further. During the night of August 12, 1961, East German soldiers laid out over 30 miles of barbed wire through Berlin to separate the East from the West. East Berliners were no longer allowed to cross over into the West, and it was harder for West Berliners to cross over, as the number of crossing checkpoints was greatly reduced. Surprised, the West threatened to place a trade embargo with the East. The purpose of this Berlin Wall was to keep Western fascists from entering East Germany and undermining the socialist state, but it primarily served the objective of stemming mass defections from East to West. The Berlin Wall was actually 2 walls. The 27-mile portion separated Berlin into East and West, which are called death strips. The Eastern Germans had also built another barrier along most of the 850-mile border between the East and the West. They contained guard dogs, watchtowers, anti-vehicle trenches, and tripwire machines. The Berlin Wall was seen as a major act of communist oppression in the West. Many East Berliners tried to cross over to the West still, but only 5,000 made it altogether, compared to the average of 2,000 daily before the wall was built. 171 people of the thousands attempts were killed. By 1989, democratization was working its way across Eastern Europe very quickly, and the government was overcome by the movement. It was announced on the evening of November 9th that travel restrictions to the West would partially subside. The spokesman for East Berlin's Communist Party announced a change in his city's relations with the West. Starting at midnight that day, he said, citizens of the GDR were free to cross the county's borders. East and West Berliners flocked to the wall, drinking beer and champagne and chanting, "Open the gate!" The triumphant Berliners climbed atop the wall, graffitied it, and took home pieces to keep the memory with them. On November 9, 1989, the Berlin Wall was brought down. This wall represented the division of all of Europe, and it was significant between all of the Germans. It was not until 1990, however, that East and West Germany were firmly united.